I'm Janice B Gordon and welcome to The Business Show. Hello, this is Janice B Gordon on The Business Show. I have Lara Morgan with me. Lara started Pacific Direct. Now, she describes herself as clueless. However, at 23, she started a business that sold sewing kits and actually sold it for 20 million 19 years later. Now, Lara, I'm really interested to find out how you take a business that's selling soaps and sewing kits to actually be a global business. What was it that you thought, actually, I can do something with this?
To be honest with you, I don't think I ever thought about the sort of very long-term potential until well into the business. I was literally making a job in the last recession as opposed to getting a job because there weren't any. So I had to find a way of making a living. I'd been given an opportunity, and from day one I'm a competitive soul. So I suppose the play was always to be the best that we could be. Early days we were an absolute nobody, but I suppose over years of learning and trial and error and huge mistakes and endless falling down and getting back up, the journey sort of took shape. And actually I was such an idiot, it took me 9 years to write a business plan, but 9 years in we were doing £4.5 million sales. So the one thing I knew how to do was how to sell. And then I guess with a business plan we became a lot more focused, a lot more professional, a lot more competent in what we were doing, and I learned management skills, and I learned how to behave better as a leader, and you start looking at yourself and then you can ask more of others, and over the period of time you go with what's working and what feels right, and you make some, I think, logical decisions, but it's always progression, and you might make mistakes. And ultimately, I put in a strategy that meant that the business had to be global. And when we sold it, we were selling in 110 countries. We were selling in 17 languages. We were selling in out of 9 offices, and I owned factories, as all good English girls should, in China and the Czech Republic. Complete fluke. I look back and I even wake up and think, when is someone going to burst my bubble?
It's an amazing story that I really wanted you to share with others today. Now, you say that you're a salesperson at your heart. Do you think that was really core to the early stages of growing your business?
Absolutely, no doubt. I mean, I'm really rigorously straight about this. I think you have nothing in any business. You don't need a business card, you don't need a website, you don't need fancy marketing. In fact, I mean, we had very little of any expenditure for years and years. We just went out and sold our product. And until you have proven that you can sell and that there are buyers and there is a need for a purchase order, everything else is irrelevant. So I'm afraid in this case I would say the sales always come first. And, because I suppose I now understand that I'm a bit of an entrepreneur, I'm inherently rubbish at admin. So the rest follows, but making the rest follow and having a real customer service ethos and doing it right takes self-discipline that I wasn't very good at, but without it, you don't grow.
95% of businesses actually only have less than 10 employees, so SMEs. However, the government put 95% of their funding into the 5% larger businesses. What do you say about this?
I think the government actually have it wrong. I mean, when you say they put 95% into the larger businesses, I think that there's a real missing piece. There's a Nesta report that says actually there's 6% of growth businesses out there, and I'm talking the fast growth, ambitious leaders that aren't the mega companies, but they're in the middle space. Personally, I think if you're going to be a startup, you're going to need to bleed and sweat and frankly cry a bit, and you should be made to prove it. And I don't think we should back many startup businesses. There are some where we need to back them from a tech investment point of view, but product-wise, I think you've got to show some gumption. On the other hand, I also believe that we completely underinvest in the growth accelerator success stories. And I'm frustrated about that because I think that if we did educate and lead ambitious people in a better way, we would have higher rates of success, less failures, and we would be employing a lot more people.
Now, you currently run a business, and I went on to the website and was amazed about the amount of resources that you offer free. Tell me more about why you started this.
Okay, so companyshortcutscom is, if you like, it's my way, I hate waste. I've hated waste, and I was brought up on, if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves, and I believe that. And there's intellectual waste. When you grow a business and you sell it, you create systems and processes, efficiencies, frameworks, templates, checklists. Frankly, most not of my own making, most influenced perhaps by me sometimes, perhaps not at all, but created by this wonderful group of people that I was lucky enough to attract and employ, and also, in some cases, requested from organizations, genius organizations who had great systems that I could learn from. And I've taken those and adopted them and put them on companyshortcutscom, because too many times we try and invent the wheel again. And actually, there is a way of running a great meeting. So use the meeting template. There are ways of, managing people better. So use good key performance indicators. So there's a recruitment process, and fundamentally, if people spent more time on the important stuff like the finances of their business and knowing where their cash was, and really caring about their people. So stop reinventing the wheel and shuffling bits of paper. Sell more. Cheat the system by using frameworks and templates. It won't be perfect, but my God, it'll be good enough. That's what Company Shortcuts is for.
I think it's fantastic that you've provided that for people. Tell me a bit more about growing your business through the people. I know that, Richard Branson, he surrounds himself with what he calls geniuses, and I think you're very similar in that way.
Yeah, no, I would say, he was an inspiration for me. I suppose as much as 15 years ago, I think I read Virginity, but he's fun. All of the people that have run great businesses that I have met and had the privilege to meet, we all know that it's nothing really, it's about us unleashing the power of others. And if you can't learn to trust, you'll never go more than 5 people, because actually 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 reports put stress on your business. That's where you're going to have to really empower and trust others to let the business flourish and grow. You can't do everything. You have to delegate some of it. It's not necessarily going to be done the way you want it to be done. So this people piece is utterly critical in going from small to bigger and bigger again. And when you become international, the trust you have to put in the Singapore office or people in far-flung places, in far-flung nationalities, gives you so much in return. I'm an ambassador for export for Britain, and the joy of growing an international business is also not to be underestimated.
Now, I want to talk more about your passion for exporting and your belief about businesses need to involve themselves more in exporting. Now, I think your background growing up in Asia has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, it does. I had to travel to school in an unnatural way, I suppose, because I was abandoned by my family, put on a plane in Hong Kong and went to school in Scotland. So I saw the world as a small place. What a privilege. Didn't know what a huge asset that mindset would be. But also I was brought up to believe that everybody has something to offer. So I've sold in Karachi, I've sold in Brazil, I've had the privilege of selling on some really cool islands, actually. But much more importantly, I've met some wonderful cultures and experienced some great places, tasted some hideous food and some delicious food, but much more importantly, the ability to be open and to engage with nationalities. The return on investment, you cannot quantify the joy that brings to life.
Not only business, but on a personal level?
Absolutely. My children think it's perfectly normal to have a Chinese factory director, a Czech general manager, a Singaporean salesperson, a German director, all in my house at a lunch, because that's the way we did it. It was a close family.
So are you trying to pass that on to your children, that mindset that the world is a very small place and to really embrace other cultures?
Yeah, I think, the internet is doing that for us anyway, but actually I think the British are appallingly weak at engaging internationally. They have to have greater humility. We have to get off our backsides and travel. Actually, the international cake is growing quicker than ours. So why don't you go and take a bit of that cake instead of stealing somebody else's British piece of cake? Do you see what I mean? So hence, I'm very keen on export, and I'm very keen that everybody has the opportunity to understand that growth comes from all over the place, but there are higher value cards and easier entry points. And actually, we put up all these barriers in England, and yet we speak English. The law around the world, in many cases, was founded by us. We have huge heritage and benefits. What we lack is the humility and at the moment, I believe, the ambition to grow a board. And that is madness, because the British are massively respected, and I have never been anywhere where I have felt unsafe.
One way of growing your business is through licensing. And you're kind of a world leader on how to license. Now, if there was a business that was thinking of doing this, really, what are the pitfalls or the things that you need to watch out for in creating a contractual agreement?
So this is a perfect example of not having a clue. I'd never licensed anything to anyone anywhere, and then the toiletries industry grew and emerged, and instead of having what we'd call invented products or brand named, we actually went out and licensed luxury brands like Aveda or Bulgari, Ermenegildo Zegna, beautiful brands like Elemis and Penhaligon's. And, initially I had the discussion and understood, sort of learned from others that you pay a fee in order to have the benefit of representing someone else's products. And what the most important thing you do in any business relationship, I think, is you put your feet in the shoes of others to understand where they're coming from. And if always you can understand what somebody else's objective is, what's the end goal, then actually everything else will fall into place, because I do believe business is win-win. It's a conversation. I'm not an aggressive salesperson. I'm an assertive salesperson. And I am looking for long-term success. So short-term success never will grow an asset. I wanted an asset. I wanted to respect the people, enjoy working with the people that I was engaging, both on the supplier side and the customer side. And licensing came about because we could provide brand miniature goods to luxury hotels on a global platform. So I learned the game.
Richard Branson said that your reputation is everything. What would you say is your reputation?
I've written a book which actually the title is More Balls Than Most, and that's really more a sentimental thing because the money goes to prostate cancer. But truthfully, I hope my reputation is that I say it how it is. I try to be down to earth. I'm not a prima donna in any way. I'm rubbish at shopping. I don't know what to spend my money on. I'm very happy with my family. They're very important to me. And actually, I think life is about putting stuff in and getting stuff out. And I see enjoying life as an emotional bank account. And I think that the more you invest in the world, it's amazing what the payback can be. And that's really, I'd like my reputation to be someone who's approachable. But then, of course, you have the challenge of many, many people approaching you, and you have to let some people down. So my priority, frankly, is I have a big goal, and my big goal is to change Britain's ambition to sell, and to sell really professionally. We are rubbish at it, and ultimately, if I could build a reputation that says she impacted Great Britain in a positive way on a global scale, I'd be happy.
I think you're on your way to do that. You certainly have the balls to achieve that goal. Sarah Blakely of Spanx, her father used to say to her when she was younger, "What have you failed at today?" And I know that your attitude is very kind of self-deprecating. And he was actually teaching his daughter to expand her boundaries. Yeah. So what have you failed at today?
Actually, I didn't go swimming first thing this morning because I'm knackered, but I fail every day, but I learn from my mistakes. And again, a British trait, we're not very good at that. I think internationally we need to be much more resilient and accept that there's an awful lot of progression, not mistakes, in business. It's just a discovery of one angle, one direction. Is it going right? Is it going wrong? Oh, it didn't work. Try another direction. And, I don't really look at it as failure. I just look at it as research, let's call it.
And feedback.
Yeah.
I met you at Lady Val's network, and there was this sharp intake of breath when you made a statement about not really liking babies, and it was a relief to a lot of women. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, I do remember. I mean, not just not liking other people's babies, but not even liking my own, so let's be brutal about it. I sort of looked at the whole early baby process as just distracting, unengaging, unintelligent, a bit mind-numbing. It wasn't for me in a sense. And of course, until you have a baby, you can't make that judgment. So then I had 3 to experiment whether I was really right. And ultimately, I don't want to change nappies. If somebody else wants to do that and I can pay them to do that while I do stuff that I prefer doing, that's how I looked at how I wanted to bring up my children in the very early days. And I think there's a lot of rubbish talked about, quality time and other bits and pieces. One week having mother at home is a good thing. The next week having mother not at home gives your children confidence. Which is it? It's nonsense. I think that it's about having balance, about wanting to engage with your children. Ultimately, I chose to sell my business at the point where my youngest could catch a ball. So, that may seem simplistic, but I can engage, have humorous conversations, share learnings. I learn from them, they learn from me. And I don't believe there is such a hard and fast thing as work-life balance. It's impossible, and we have to be more honest that at the one time work is working, you feel guilty about not seeing enough of the children. And then, of course, I feel fat because I haven't done exercise. And it's this sort of time for me, time for children, time for them, time for the husband. You will never get it all aligned. I think there is a female thing where you always carry guilt, and I think we have to be brutally honest about that. So sometimes I let it rise to the top and I'm a miserable cow, and other times I'm not. But, overall, I hope that I have a happy balance.
So women really can't have it all, is that what you're saying? But it's been all right about that.
Well, I have 3 children. I'm married to the best-looking man in the world. I have a company that I've managed to sell. I've got other interests. I would just say that you have to find what feels right for you. And if you're lucky enough to make some of the cool decisions about the right partnership, which you need support in building a small business, and I had wonderful support. I did make sacrifices, but I never missed sports day or the nativity play, and I would really suggest that those are important, benchmarks that make me think I have contributed. I haven't been, completely irrational about the importance of my presence, but my presence is not also the be-all and end-all, and my children are, I hope, growing in a healthy and safe environment. Isn't that more important? I think it is.
So, you've sold your business, you have company shortcuts. What's really for you going forward in the next kind of 5 years? Will you start another business and grow it like Pacific Direct? Or are there other things out there that you want to kind of go forward and achieve?
I'm in the lucky position where I still own a healthy chunk of Pacific Direct. I chose to keep nearly 20% of the business. I have no intention of competing with Pacific Direct. I have a number of other interests. I have a hobby investment called wellheeled.com, which is a shoe invention to protect women's feet when they're driving, which is invented by a British entrepreneur, young woman in my village who was my babysitter. So that's quite a cool story. I have the luxury slipper company because that's in the hospitality sector that I love, but not competing with Pacific. I also have some tech investments. In my free time, I do triathlon. So my answer to your question, what's next, is a full life. I love business. It's my hobby. It's my playground, and I sort of feel as if someone's taken away my toys if I don't get to play. I do have an ambition to be remembered for being a good mother. But I also have an ambition to be number 1 in the world at triathlon. So, my ambitions are big, but ultimately the end goal is I really am passionate about sales growth in Britain, because without sales we have nothing. And at the moment, Britain is pretty poor, and we need to change it. So that's the business goal. There's family and private goals. And I think just taking the most out of life and enjoying it and sharing it with people, and frankly, laughter is very important in that.
It's been fantastic speaking to you, and what I really love is your no-nonsense, down-to-earth speak, and it also gives women kind of a bit of relief that it's all right.
It's all right to cry too, by the way.
Exactly. So thank you very much. It's been wonderful speaking to Lara Morgan. This is Janice B Gordon, The Business Show. Thank you.